Joan of Arc, Casanova, and the Big Bad Wolf. What do you share with these bigger-than-life figures from the pages of history and fable? Well, let's see. Joan of Arc was hell-bent on driving the English out of France. Casanova was out to experience the pleasures of seduction as often as was humanly possible. And the Big Bad Wolf had a serious craving for pig. Three of them, actually. Each one had a plan, a goal, and a strategy. And each one employed a series of steps or actions or tactics to achieve his or her goal. They didn't always win, but they did have strategy and tactics. That's what you have in common with Joan of Arc, Casanova, and the Big Bad Wolf. Strategy and tactics. Fire Service trainers, Division Chief Gene Chandler of the Poudre Fire Authority in Fort Collins, Colorado, and Chief Russ Sanders of the Louisville, Kentucky Fire Department joined Fire Company for the first in a three-part look at company strategy and tactics.
The strategy is your plan, and the tactics tends to be the implementation. And what your strategy does is set your goals and objectives, and that sets the direction you want to go. And your goals will point the direction, and your objectives will be the signposts you follow to get there. So that when you implement your plan, you got some place you want to end up, and you got some places you want to visit on the way to getting there. And the tactics portion are the things you're going to do, the pulling the hose line, kicking the door in, doing your search and rescue, squirting the water, throwing ladders, punching the hose, that kind of thing. And if you don't have a strategy, then the tactics don't apply to anything. They're just reactionary things that you're doing. If you have a strategy and the tactics are addressing those, then you're in a proactive mode, that you've identified problems, got the solutions, and now I'm implementing my solutions by the tactics we're carrying out. Any firefighter, and that's something you get with your badge. It's the mission of the fire service. And you ask any firefighter, and they'll tell you our mission is to save lives and protect property. So it's one of the things that tends to drive the rest of your decision-making process is your basic mission. And some people call them the tactical priorities, some call the incident priorities. But basically what they are is life safety, and that applies both to potential victims, residents or occupants of a structure, plus our firefighters. Your role as an officer, one of your primary obligations is to protect the safety of your firefighters. So life safety is our number one priority. Incident stabilization is next, and basically by that what we're saying is that what we want to do is to minimize the amount of damage or spread of the incident once we intervene. So we want to stabilize the incident as quickly as we can. And the third is property conservation, and that's property can be replaced, but throughout the incident, we can conserve property as we go. The initial attack, how we enter the building, do we do it in a way that causes a minimum amount of damage and still allows us access in? Flow stream management, do we just go in and flood the place, or do we do an intelligent job? How soon do we drill salvage covers, that type of thing? So our basic mission is any firefighter will tell you, is the protection of life and property, and that's what drives us. We have to understand is that there's a checklist we have to follow, of things we have to do if we want to do it right. And when we say that, we say the first thing we have to do is think, then plan, then act. And the thinking and planning is the strategy. The acting tends to be the tactic. And too often we start with tactics and then have to go back and develop the strategy. But if you look at the history of an incident, by the time that a fire is discovered, reported, we are dispatched, get to the equipment, respond, and get into service, and get that first line pulled and ready to go. A lot of time may have elapsed. And what we need to do is to take a portion of the history of that incident. And I always tell people we need a GYST. Do you know what GYST stands for? Um, some folks may have different version of it, but it's get yourself together. Mm. Before you can ever hope to control the fire, the first thing you have to do is get control of yourself. So take some time, take a couple of deep breaths, get yourself settled down, and then take an analytical look at the problem, so that you're not emotional, you're not reactionary. What we want to be is proactive. And by doing that, we've got to take some time to analyze what the problem is. We call that size up, and most of us think of size up as what we see when we get on scene, but there's a wealth of information that's available to you prior to that, and a lot of it has to do with your pre-fire planning, and if you're responding to a pre-fire plan building, there's a lot you know about that, and you have made some plans as far as fire behavior predictions, likely problems you may encounter, those things that you do in pre-fire planning. The resources that you respond with, will impact the response route, the weather conditions at the time of day will impact on how you get there. On a highly traveled thoroughfare at 5 o'clock, maybe that's a poor choice to take. So there's a lot of different things that you know before you ever get the alarm that will impact you. The address should tell you a lot. If the address comes in and it's a residential area, then more than likely you're going to have to deal with a room and contents house fire. If it's a commercial address, then you have a variety of problems that you may have to face that would be totally different. So there's a lot of information you have available to you. And what you want to do with size up is, first of all, understand that size up is 3 phases. First is all that information you know before you get the alarm. The second phase starts with the dispatch information that you get, where you're going, the type of emergency that you're responding to. Dispatch information will include the other units that are responding, and then what you see once you arrive on scene, what you are able to see visually, information that you're able to gather from either occupants or neighbors or witnesses. That will impact on your problem identification based on what you see. The third phase of size up, that's a critical phase, is the ongoing size up that you make throughout the incident. Somebody said, I don't know whether it's true or not, and frankly don't care, but somebody said once that first-in officer makes 100% of the decisions based on 10% of the information. So what you want to do is to increase the amount of information you have about the incident so that you're continuing to learn more and more about the incident so that you're better able to address the actions necessary to deal with it, and making sure that you're dealing with what the real problems are. But as far as the on-scene size up, what you're trying to do there is, in the think part of think, plan, and act, is to determine what's the problem here. And based on the information that I have, whether it be limited or not, what's my best guess and my best perception of what the problem is. Once you've identified the problem, then you can go about the planning process of identifying a solution. But until you've made an effort to identify the problem, you can't effectively determine a solution. So you need to take time to think, develop a plan, and then to act. And when you act, based upon the problems you've identified, the action plan that you've developed and establishes your goals and objectives, then you need to evaluate your resources. Do I have enough resources? Do I have the right resources? Do I need aerial equipment? Is there, based on the incident, any special requirements, hazmat units or whatever? And then you need to apply your resources in the most effective manner that you can so that you maximize their effectiveness. And one of the things is that if part of your resource evaluation, if you wonder if you need additional resources, you've answered the question. If you think you need additional resources, get them. Get them coming. Because what we're trying to do when we initially put our action plan, develop it, and implement it, we're kind of hoping, beyond hope, that it's going to work. But there's one assumption you should make about plan A. And that's that it ain't going to work, and you better have plan B. Now, a lot of that has to do with your depth of knowledge of fire behavior, or the type of construction you're dealing with, or the type of occupancy, the type of fuel loading that's in there. That's whether or not you're going to need additional resources. But if you need them, and you've got a plan A that you shouldn't have extreme confidence in, and as a consequence, you develop plan B by anticipating what problems may occur, or your plan may not work. You better also have the resources available to implement plan B should you need to. If you wait till you need to implement plan B and don't have the resources there, my strong suggestion to you is get a plan C. My guess is you're going to need it. So get resources coming.
Before you actually need them.
If you think you're going to need them, anticipate. That's being proactive. Because every fire and every emergency has a leader. Now, sometimes one of us takes the leadership role, and sometimes the fire takes the leadership role. And that distinguishes whether or not we're being proactive or reactive. If we're being reactive, the fire does something, we react to it. If it's something else, we react to that. Well, we always claim victory. We always claim we put the fire out. But oftentimes it's just because the fire got tired and went out, didn't have any more to burn, and we brag about the fact that it took us 5 hours to put that sucker out. Well, hell, if we hadn't shown up, it had burned down in 2 hours. All we did is, provide time for the donuts and the coffee to show up.
Basically, two types of fire attacks, or two modes of strategy. That is, first, offensive, or secondly, defensive. There are three questions you have to ask yourself, and it's all part of your size up. The stage of the fire and the location of the fire. That's important to consider that. The probability of effecting a rescue. What safety hazards will this present to the firefighters? What's the likelihood that we can effect a safe rescue? And my available resources. These are critical to you making that decision whether we're going to go in an offensive attack or a defensive attack. An offensive attack basically is an interior aggressive attack. There are more risks involved without question. You have to weigh those risks. You have to coordinate ventilation at the same time to prevent flashover, any possibility of backdraft. You have to make certain that you have ladders positioned properly so that your firefighters, if they are trapped, they can quickly get out of the building. It's certainly it's a riskier operation than a defensive operation. If you decide that, based on those three considerations, that you prefer a defensive operation, maybe you don't have any rescues involved, it's a warehouse type fire, maybe 60, 70, or 80% of the buildings involved in fire are possibly fully involved, and obviously you wouldn't attack the fire in an offensive manner. Then you go with a defensive operation. A defensive operation is basically an exterior operation. You're going to order large master streams on all sides of the building if possible. Your key consideration here is now to protect exposures. You're no longer concerned with an interior attack and making a rescue. You've made that decision. You've gone to a defensive mode. One very important consideration is never have an offensive and a defensive operation simultaneously on the same structure. This has happened many times in the past, and firefighters are very likely to get injured, if not killed, when this happens. Always make sure your communication system is such that command is calling the shots and that command has decided whether it's offensive or defensive. Everybody knows the game plan on the fire ground and everybody's operating in that same mode. It's important to have a system. Many times, if you are in an offensive mode, it may become necessary to go to a defensive mode. Possibly there's a structural integrity question in the property. Maybe the firefighters are losing the fire and now are being forced to back out. You need a system in place and a standard operating procedure that you can implement
that advises, alerts the firefighters on the scene that we are now going to a defensive mode to withdraw from the property and take a defensive position. Some of the problems we have seen in the past when we do switch from an offensive to a defensive mode is a hand line may be left in place. Firefighters have a tendency to pick that hand line up. They want to do something. They're taught to be aggressive. Shut those hand lines down. Break those hand lines. Get them out of the way. Don't tempt the firefighter with making that mistake. Remember, when you decide on an operation, whether it's offensive or defensive, make certain that you communicate that clearly. Make certain that you have a safety officer on the scene watching what's going on. Make certain that your span of control is such that you can manage the resources, especially the people resources at the scene. It's all part of your size up. Based on the size up, you must make that decision, follow through, and make certain that you have communicated that decision to all the responsible people on the fire scene.
It's the decision that the first in officer makes, whether that initial attack will be offensive or defensive. Now, how the officer goes about making that decision has a lot to do with your knowledge of the problem you're dealing with. We claim that we're firefighters, and if you're going to be a firefighter, you better understand what the enemy is. And by doing that, we have to have a knowledge and understanding of fire behavior, what its characteristics are, and be able to make a fairly accurate prediction about what it's going to do. And if in your judgment that based on what I see and on my best guess and my best vision of what's going to occur here, that this is a loser. It's a hard thing for firefighters to do is to say, look at a building and say, it's not my house, and the sucker's gone. There's nothing I can do about it. Now, if you're not capable of making that decision and recognizing that, whether you're going to be offensive or defensive, and to recognize what is really a defensive fire, you may risk people in a building that has no hope of ever being salvaged. But there's occasions when we talk about the transition when you're switching from one to the next, that you may not have the resources to put the fire up. There may be a victim inside. So your judgment is, based on the resources I have available, I may be able to hold the fire long enough to get the victims out, and I can do that in a manner that's expeditious enough that's not going to provide more victims in the way of firefighters. And then once the victim is out, once you reach that goal, then you may have to pull out and do a defensive operation. So there's times when it's either marginal that you may try an offensive attack, and then based on your evaluation of the initial actions that we're not going to get it, that you're going to have to back out. And that's one of the things you need to make clear to everybody, that if you're going defensive, don't leave somebody inside of the building that doesn't get that word, because then streams start pouring in from the outside, and you don't do that with people still inside the building.
There seems to be some question about the ICS, the Incident Command System, how it relates to strategy and tactics. I want to talk about that for just a moment. The Incident Command System is a command and control system. It has many elements. Basically, there are 5 management functions. You always start with command. Everything starts there. Then you go to finance, logistics, operations, and planning. These 5 management functions occur on every single incident that you respond to, whether it be a grass fire, an automobile fire, a single-family dwelling, or a high-rise building. In some level, you're always dealing with these elements, these management functions. In addition to that, command has 3 staff functions that they must be concerned about. That's safety, public information, and liaison. So these 8 factors are always taking place on any incident. Strategy is simply your broad objectives, or your broad, I guess a better term would be your broad priorities. For example, we break strategies down into three categories: life safety always being number one, instant stabilization always being number two, and property conservation always being number three. Now, many times you may have to accomplish, for example, instant stabilization in order to effect a rescue. So they don't always fall in that same particular order. Tactics are simply the activities that take place in order to accomplish those strategic objectives. For example, if your strategic objective is to ventilate the building, the specific tactic may be to open a hole in the roof, to knock a window out, to place a fan in the door for positive ventilation. Any of these type activities to accomplish those overall strategic objectives. Now, when you look at the three, obviously there is a clear difference among the incident command system, strategy, and tactics. But I think you can also see that each interact. It's very important that each operation is playing its part out properly, that you understand each, that all three are working, interacting together, and when this occurs, you'll have a successful operation.
If you're not the incident commander and you're given an objective by the incident commander to carry out, you still have to manage your slice of the pie. The incident commander is giving you an objective to carry out that's a slice of the incident. All of the management skills and all of the things that you had to do were you the incident manager, you still have to do at that level. You still have to think and plan and act. You can't quit thinking and just acting. You have to do your own side of it. You got your assignment based on some assumptions or some information that the incident commander had. All right, if he sent you into a building, he may not have a full understanding of what's going on in there. The best information that he's going to be able to get is the information that you're going to be able to provide from in there. If you're going to have, you're going to be a point in the incident, you're going to have a lot better understanding of what's going on in your portion of the pie than the incident commander is. And you need to manage that. You need to do your own size up and your own evaluation of what the real problem is. Because you were assigned to a perceived problem by the incident commander. Based on what you see and how your actions are impacting, the problem may be beyond the scope of what the incident commander assumed. And so you have to manage that portion. You have to manage your resources and apply them to the incident as best you can based on your evaluation and your plan and your actions. And it's critical that you provide the incident commander with that information, because the incident commander is responsible for the whole pie. And your portion of it may be vitally important to the action plan. So what you need to do is to keep the incident commander as up to speed as you can about how your actions are impacting and how your portion of the plan is working.
In parts 2 and 3, we'll examine size up, apparatus positioning, training, and communications. That's Fire Company for this week. Until next time, stay well and stay safe. Bye-bye. Strangely calm, ready for anything. Are you? You deserve to be. Today in Fire Company, we'll show you how the time and care you spend on strategy and tactics before the first alarm is struck will give you a fighting chance. Hello again and welcome to Fire Company. I'm Ken Hines. Today in part 2 of our series on strategy and tactics, we'll give you the training tools that you can use to develop and practice your strategic plan and tactics. You may already be using them. You may have the most highly developed strategic plan and training program in the world, and I really hope that you do. But if you don't, keep going right now, because what you and your company don't know really can take its toll and even kill you. Where do you begin, you ask? Well, Chief Russ Sanders of the Louisville, Kentucky Fire Department says a good fireground strategy starts with a thorough size-up. Here's a solid technique that you can use.
Our strategic plan is a three-step process. The first step of that process is the SWOT analysis. And SWOT is SWOT. It's an acronym for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You look internally at your department, you determine what your strengths and weaknesses are. Then you look externally to see what opportunities and threats are there. When you look internally at your strengths and weaknesses, you look at your people resources, your equipment resources, your apparatus resources, your training resources, your command procedures, your radio procedures. You look at everything. You determine what are we doing well and what aren't we doing so well. Then you try to strengthen your strengths and diffuse your weaknesses. Then you look to the external environment, and that includes both the public and private sector agencies that may be able to help you. Maybe neighboring fire departments, police department, sanitation department, public works department, emergency medical services. The list will go on and on. You work with those agencies. They have a lot of resources, both people and equipment resources that can help you. You also look to the private sector. Your local university may have a chemist that can assist you or a psychologist that can help you with debriefing. You look at your private sector. Heavy equipment is very important on the fire scene or a hazmat scene. Moving and storage company can provide trucks that could be very important. And if you have to move large groups of people, your local transit authority. And again, the list goes on and on. But it's also important to look out there in that external environment and see who is a threat to you, because there are threats out there. And it's very important that you identify those threats. Any threat that may hinder you in accomplishing your mission, you need to identify that and you need to plan accordingly. The next step is a community risk analysis that you want to conduct. That's everything from going out and looking at your current building stock, pre-planning, looking at the plan review anytime there's a renovation plan. But it's also very important to identify any future construction that's planned. You want to be a part of that process. You want to be involved. You want to be talking to the building owners. You want to make certain that they follow code. And you also want to try to lobby that owner so that maybe he or she can add a few additional benefits for the firefighter so that they can better do their job. A lot of things that may not cost the owner any more at all. If you're in that early stage of the process, you can get that accomplished. And pre-planning, again, is very important. If the building is already constructed, it's very important that you go out and pre-plan. You walk through that building with all the companies involved so they all know exactly what is expected, what obstacles they may face, what challenges may be there. And then the third part of that process is the development of formal written SOPs, goals, and objectives, so that everyone in the department can sit down and look at those goals and objectives, look at those operational SOPs, and decide where we're going. We all know where we're going. We know how to get there now. We can all work together and accomplish our mission.
Louisville's internal-external analysis is a good starting point for fireground strategy. It addresses what Sanders says is the most important part of strategy and tactics, and that's the size up.
The most important thing to remember, to reiterate, when you're talking about strategy and tactics, is your size up. And size up's a broad term. It includes a lot of things. It includes, like I say, getting involved in that plan review process. It means going out and pre-planning your building. It means looking into your department to look at your resources. Where are we strong? Where are we weak? It means looking outside the department. What opportunities and threats are out there? All of that is size up. It means getting to the scene and asking, what do I have? Where is it going? And what resources are available? And how long will it be before they're here to handle this situation? Each of those components of a size up are critically important when you're dealing with a fire, and especially a complex fire like a high-rise building. But it's very important on a single-family dwelling as well. You cannot afford to make mistakes, and especially mistakes that could have been prevented through training and planning. All of that is covered in your size up, and your size up continues right through overhaul, because as we mentioned, overhaul is a very dangerous time of a fire. Many firefighters are injured and killed during overhaul, so that size up process must continue. And that size up process includes making that decision. Are we going to have an offensive or a defensive operation here? You have to look at the location and the amount of fire. What risk are you going to put the firefighters in? What likelihood is there that you can effect a rescue? Is there a possibility for a rescue? All of these things you consider before you ever make a decision to go to an offensive or defensive mode. And when you do go with that mode, whether offensive, certainly if it's an offensive mode, always remember you can change. Have a procedure in place to call those firefighters out. Don't feel like I've made the decision, I have to stick with it, because you may have made the wrong decision.
Division Chief Gene Chandler of the Poudre Fire Authority in Fort Collins, Colorado, shows you how to complete a first-in size-up on the bread and butter of all fire department fire calls, single-family dwellings. Listen and watch for his safety tips.
One of the things we need to do if we're in that first in company is to try to identify what the problem is. If we see fire through the living room window, that may not be the major problem. If you're in a house like this that's multiple story and you identify the problem as I need to kick in the front door and put the fire out in the living room, your real problem may be upstairs hanging out the window with mom and the baby screaming, help me, help me, help me, while you're fiddling around down here putting fire out. You're driving smoke and hot gases on upstairs and endangering them. So one of the things when we pull up, is we need to identify and get an idea of what the problems are. First of all is, and most likely, that the building is occupied or unoccupied. If it's occupied, one of the things you'll see is, will it have curtains in the window? Is the yard in decent repair? Are there toys, bicycles, cars in the driveway? A clear indication that the building is occupied. The other thing is, when we look at the house, we need to look at the house from the outside and picture what we think is on the inside. This is a tri-level. We know just by looking at the window that the big window in the front indicates that's where the living room is. In a building like this, the bedrooms are going to be upstairs. When you have small windows, that usually indicates the bathroom. The bathroom is either small windows or frosted windows. So in houses like this, we know that the living room and the living area is downstairs. Most likely the bedrooms are upstairs. In a ranch-style home, the bedrooms will be at one end, the kitchen, living room at the other end. So that what we want to do is to walk around the house and try to picture what the inside of it looks like. Okay, we know now that the bedrooms are upstairs. We've got a living room here. How do you get upstairs? The stairway, in almost any house you go into, as soon as you go through the front door, you should have easy access to the stairway. They should be in the general proximity in most all houses of the front door. Okay, when we go on around the building, one of the things that we want to look for is, first of all, this house has a basement. One of the good things about this house is that the escape windows are big. There's easy access in and out of the basement if we have to get in to get a victim or to get victims out. If we come down the stairway, we know now that in trying to get back up the stairway, if it's blocked by heat or fire or smoke, that we have another way out. One of the things you always want to do is to have the second way out. Okay, we have two large windows here, indicating that we've got two means of getting in or out of the building if we need them. All right. We come around to the back side of the house, and what can we tell just by looking? One of the things we need to get is a perspective of the dimension. What are the size of the rooms? Get an idea from the outside, get an idea where the locations of the doors and windows are, so that when you go inside, you have some landmarks. I can tell just by looking at this house that here's bigger windows. This is a window that's higher. Why is this window higher than these? Because it has to clear the sink. This is a good indication that the window we see here is above the kitchen sink. My guess would be the living room on that side. If you've got a kitchen here, more than likely this is a dining area here. Okay, coming to this side, we see two windows upstairs. My guess would be that we have two bedrooms on this side of the house upstairs. If we have fire in one of these bedrooms, one of the things we want to do is to give us another access out, so that when we're laddering the building, to provide our second means out should the stairway become blocked. If we can't ladder the other side, ladder the room next to the involved building so you have quick access out. Make sure that the company that ladders the building and that puts the second means of escape out of the building, communicate that with the folks inside so they know where the location is. Okay, downstairs, what have we got? We've got a patio door and some windows. Most most homes, the patio door comes off of the family room or a dining area. This one, with the proximity to the kitchen, my guess would be that the dining area would be this side. Looking at this, this is level across. That's a fairly good sized room in there. So if I'm on my hands and knees, the room looks a lot bigger than what I see it out here. So get an idea of the size of the room, because they're gonna look bigger once you get inside. So the guess is the family room. Right now, I see the fireplace. We didn't see it in the front room, so I'd bet my life this is now the family room based on the patio door and the fireplace. So if we come here at night and we're aware that the house is occupied, there may be victims inside, what do? Try to confine the fire, protect the means of egress, and when we do our search, our responsibility is to get the victims out quickly. Now, where are the victims likely to be? And they're likely to be in means of egress, and that's hallways or close to or behind doors, so that when we go in, make sure that we look behind the doors and that we check those probable means of escape first. If we suspect that if we see a tricycle in the yard and we suspect there's children inside, where are children going to be? Children tend to hide. So we got to make sure to look under beds, look in closets, look in the bathroom. Elderly people like to hide in bathrooms sometimes because they think they're safe in a shower or tub. So that when we're doing our search and when we're in looking for victims, make sure that we look in those most likely areas first. And then after that, then we can do a more systematic search where we do a right-hand or left-hand search. So one of the things we want to do is, so when we come in, we want to make our 360 of the building. We've got another access to the garage here. It's a metal-clad door with a deadbolt lock. We know it has a deadbolt lock. So if we force entry, it's going to have to be with a degree of strength and perseverance, because some of the deadbolt locks are hard to get through. Okay, once we've done the 360 of the building and we've had a chance to look at the entire building, then what we want to do is hopefully identify where the fire is and what's our best means of entry. In this house, we've identified the front door, the side door to the garage, and the back door as possible means of entry. What we want to do is to put as much of the unburned portion of the house behind us, so that we're attacking towards the fire and pushing the fire back to an area that's already been burned. It'll go out quicker. You're protecting the unburned portion of the building. What we want to do is to protect stairways and means of escape for victims or for search crews you have in getting victims out.
We can't stress enough how important it is to train your crew in strategy and tactics. Your training doesn't have to be high-tech. It just has to be.
You do everything from, again, company level training where we just sit there with a company officer and all the firefighters participating and discussing the different tactics that we would use, the different strategies. We always reinforce over and over that life safety, incident stabilization, and property conservation. And we'll take that all the way to getting vacant buildings and very safely burning those buildings. And you don't have to burn the building. A lot of times we will get a vacant building and we'll do nothing but practice pulling ceilings, opening walls, cutting holes in the roof, laddering the building. All of these evolutions are important. You must practice them or they just won't work. You cannot wait until you have a fire and hope that a firefighter understood what you meant when you talked about opening a roof. You have to get up there, open the roof. You have to talk about the safety precautions that you must take. You have to talk about the size of the hole, how you have to drop the ceiling. All of these need to be practiced. They need to be discussed. They need to be understood, but they need to be practiced and reinforced.
Here's another training technique that you can use. Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue in Aloha, Oregon uses high-tech computer graphics and television to train its company officers in strategy and tactics.
Okay, this is an example of one of the industrial buildings we have within our district. It's called Intel Company. And what we'll do as the training division is we'll take some people from the studio and we'll go out and we'll actually videotape that building. We'll come back to the studio and through the Amiga computer system, we'll take a still from the video we take and we'll build a fire. And this is an example. We have flames showing from the roof and we have a smoke pattern. And we can change what any situation we'd like to do so. And then what we'll do is have the company officer come in and they'll sit down and they'll see this picture for approximately 5 minutes. And what we do is we allow them about 45 minutes to familiarize themselves with the picture, or 45 seconds, excuse me, to familiarize themselves with the picture. And then we'll ask them to arrive at the scene. And that's when they'll start to describe their initial size up and start setting up their strategic goals and objectives of what they're going to do. And then they'll start assigning equipment that's going to be coming to that fire, that's on the box assignment. And once they're done, we'll sit down and kind of critique what they did and how well they presented it. And what we're looking for is how well they communicate with the company that they're coming in. Do they establish a good size up so that people, as they're driving to the fire, can actually get an idea of what's going on? And then how do they communicate their goals and objectives and their strategic planning? And do they utilize resources that are available to them within this district? Do they need the power company to shut power off? Do they need different things like that? So it's a good way for them to practice. Okay, first of all, you're in the daytime hours, okay, which usually in an industry like this, we have quite an occupancy load. So you have to realize that there's going to be a lot of people in there. Hopefully they've all exited the building, but that's a concern you have. It also lets us know that, one, we do have a working fire. We see flame and smoke showing. And then, again, with the pre-plan that they have, they can lay out the building. They'll know the hydrant locations. They'll be able to select what hydrants they want to use. They'll be able to know where the fire department connections are if the building's sprinklered. It gives them that type of information so they can assign different engines to do the different tasks. And in this situation, this is just one of several buildings within that complex. And again, it'll let them know which building that is. So there's a lot of information between what you can see here and your pre-plan that can pretty well help set up your fire.
To implement your strategy safely, you need to know how long it takes for your crew to perform different tactical evolutions that you'll require of them on the fire ground.
If you give an assignment to someone, it's important for you to understand how long you should reasonably expect for that assignment to be carried out. The best example is that if you go to a structure with the potential of a backdraft, obviously the action that needs to be taken is that the first thing we need to do is to vent high in the building to relieve the pressure. All right, how long does it take to do that? How long does it take one of your companies, based on the number of personnel you have, the equipment you have, the training you have, and the expertise that's available, how long does it take them to ventilate so that the building is safe to open up and go in and attack? So one of the things that can happen is that if you don't understand that, then you may want everything to be done at once, and that can be dangerous. The other thing that can happen is that people get impatient. If my assignment is kick in the door and go and put the fire out, and it's taken another company what I consider to be too long to get it ventilated, then I may get impatient and do something that's not real smart.
Strategy and tactics apply to every incident, every emergency. Here's how the same strategic objectives for a residential fire apply to a vehicular accident. You've got to establish command. You've got to execute a thorough size-up of the situation, determine the hazards present, and the probability of rescue. You've got to evaluate and apply your resources correctly, placing your apparatus, maybe finding a helicopter landing place. And in many situations, you've got to work with outside agencies like the police department to establish traffic control. Your strategic priorities of life safety, incident stabilization, and property conservation are there throughout. Here's another way to train yourself and your company in strategy and tactics. Create a scenario, show it to your crew, then have them make the call. Now let's try it now. How'd you do? Can you expand on this idea? Discuss each point of your strategy with your crew. You don't need fancy graphics and technology to train in strategy and tactics. A chalkboard and chalk will do the job. Do some what ifs with your company. Go out, walk around some buildings. If this is burning, what do we do? Where do we want to put the apparatus? How do we attack the fire? That's how you can learn strategy and tactics. But the key is to simply do it. It's your responsibility as the company officer. The best strategy in the world will fail without effective communications. Make fireground communications a key part of your training.
The fire ground is the epitome of communication project. High excitement, high demand to take action, a lot of confusion. It's the worst case scenario for effective communication. So if you can't communicate in a clear, concise manner that's easily understood, because people aren't in the most receptive mode when it comes to their listening skills. They're wanting to do things, and everybody's got their adrenaline rush going. And so what you have to do is, when you implement your plan, put it in a manner that it's quick and clear, and you need to do a feedback loop to get the information back, so that I give you an order, you repeat it back to me, and two things can happen in that. I may be excited, and you may. And this happened when we first started doing this. I found this to happen, that I would give people an order, and rather than listening to what I meant, they would listen to what I said. And when they repeated it back to me, almost word for word, they were wrong. It isn't what I meant. And it gives you a chance to correct what you said and to clear up any confusion that they may have had.
Here's another idea. After every incident, sit down and discuss what happened and how you can improve on your strategy and tactics. Make sure those improvements get into your SOPs, and then train some more. Kind of like a mini critique before you do the department-wide critique of your fire or emergency incident. Next time, we'll walk you through a multiple family dwelling size zone. Visit the scene of a high-rise fire and discuss the dangers on the downside of an incident and what you can do to keep your people safe from the time they leave the station to the time they return. Until then, stay well, stay safe. Bye-bye.